So we'll start that part now. And I have lots of colleagues with me to share updates with you and then do a little bit of a breakout activity as well today. So Mark, you're running the show. Do you want to advance to the next slide? And see, I just kind of covered that. Welcome. We're glad that you found some time to join us today to learn about what's going on with early on in early childhood special education or preschool special education. So what we're going to cover today, we're going to start with the preschool special education updates, the pupil accounting guidance and ECSE hours, waivers for students for Mars Rule 1754, a little bit on masks. We'll give you an update on the PDG applications and how that's going, some updates on the GEARS MEGS Plus application for early on. Also updates on the 2021 State School Aid Act, Section 54D, wrapping up your fiscal year 2020 for 54D as well. And then some realignment of the birth to 5 services at MDE. And then we'll give you some time to talk with each other about successes, hurdles, needs, and what next steps might be needed for these updates or from us for these updates. So as a reminder, our updates are always posted on the Early On EOTTA-ccresa.org website or the Office of Innovative Projects website. You can always find our events on the left-hand side under All Project Updates, and past recordings will be under the All Project News, and that will be there either later this afternoon or early tomorrow morning for this particular call, which you can find past calls there as well. I'll turn over to Noelle to do some introductions.
Great. Good to see all of you again. My name is Noelle Kelty. I'm the Director of Early Childhood Development and Family Education. And with us today, we have Laura Goldthwait. Do you want to say hello?
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. And Colleen O'Connor.
Good morning.
Good morning. And I wasn't sure if we had anybody else from our office with us this morning, Barb or Cheryl or...
We have Alan Knapp with us.
Perfect. Hello, Alan.
Greetings, kids.
And Barb had indicated she's in another meeting and may join us shortly.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lisa Wazak. I'm the Preschool Special Education Coordinator with Michigan Department of Education.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christy Callahan. I'm Director of the Office of Innovative Projects at Clinton County RESA. Happy to be with you this morning.
And hi, everyone. I'm Nancy Serbick-Goins, and I had a chance to introduce myself in the beginning. I am the Technical Assistance and Training Manager here at the Office of Innovative Projects.
So we're going to turn things over around today than our usual way we have the agenda. So if you were paying attention when Nancy was going through it, we're going to talk about preschool special updates first. And the reason being is because I am double booked this morning. And as soon as I am finished giving my updates, I will be signing off. But I want to put out there if there's any questions that come up for preschool special ed, Mark Kuipers is on the call and can address any of those preschool special ed questions. And as always, we take note of what's in the chat. So we're going to start off with preschool special education updates. If you recall, we had OS guidance that came out in September of 2020. So just want to highlight that there is revised guidance that has come out this month in October. And as always, these links get put in the chat box and there will be on the PDF that you can locate them. But where this was focused this time is they updated around questions in the frequently asked questions around pupil accounting. And really looking and talked about this last time, and even for those that are part of the MACE, it went into the MACE updates. But looking at how the IEP continues to be the reference point for all reporting for the full FTE equivalency. Contingency learning plans are strongly recommended as a reflection of IEP implementation. But again, keeping in mind, everything is centered around what's on that written IEP. So that's really important. When we talk about the updates in the frequently asked questions, One of the biggest things that was out there was the webinar. So if we can go back a slide, thanks. There is a people accounting webinar for those of you that have not tuned into this. It is 90 minutes of really useful information. I will, candidly just say the downside of it is there's no text with it. So you have to listen to the 90 minutes to be able to pull what you need out of it. So I have to thank Mark Kuipers for taking his time to go through it a couple of times to help really pull out what we need to know for preschool special education. And it comes down to days and hours and attendance in that membership piece. In the chat box, you have a link to the YouTube recording of this pupil accounting if you haven't seen it yet, and if you're interested. Again, I just kind of wish they would have had some transcript to go along with it or some bulleted points, but it's useful. Not all of it just for preschool special ed, but I do know many of you have so many other hats you wear. So when we get down to looking at hours, the biggest thing is to continue to remind you that as of September 30th, last month, the waivers that were in place for 1754 and 1755 are no longer in place. Reiterate it, but I do know, and even taking note that we have 79 people on the call today. And I'm always impressed with, as we continue doing our updates, the amount of energy and response we're getting from the field. But not everyone's been on previous calls. So I want to reiterate, all those waivers are that were in effect for the 1920 school year expired September 30th. We are currently looking at what waivers may need to be in place for the 2021 school year, but at this time, there is no waiver in place. And there again is another link to a PDF about those updates. So when we look at the Public Act 165 from September 30th, talking about the clock hours for 1754, it's looking at how many hours. And as you can see on the slide, and I don't want to mess this up, so I'm going to read it verbatim along with you. FTE for pupils enrolled in a classroom program under Mars Rule 1754 is to be determined by dividing the number of class hours scheduled and provided per year by 450 instructional hours. And there is a link to the legislation document regarding this. So as you know, on these updates, we're just giving you the most recent information up to date as we know it, and also trying to help translate it a bit without botching the translation. So there's the document for you, but this is the calculation for it. The latest guidance is on masks. As we know, in Michigan, there's been a bit of uncertainty as we know how the Supreme Court has recently had a ruling, and the past executive orders that were ordered by our governor not longer being in effect. This is nothing about politics. This is literally about what's in front of us. Really wanting to keep in mind, as the executive orders have are being told that they no longer hold weight, the Health and Human Services Director has an emergency order in place requiring masks when in contact with persons from multiple households. So as we're in person with our students and our children and our families, really looking at the importance of masks. And I don't know what your local districts are doing or your ISDs. I'm just sharing out what currently is the emergency order by the Director from Health and Human Services. And there is a link for that PDF as well. So the one thing that I mentioned on our last call, and it continues to be a hot topic across not just Michigan, but also the nation. I've shared many points before. My position exists in every state. So there's 57, because there's 57 states and territories, preschool special ed coordinators. And one thing we're looking at is as we go into hybrid and as we're experiencing hybrid and virtual learning, what types of activities are included? And there was a national presentation that was done last week, and I really enjoyed how they were looking at synchronous and asynchronous learning and kind of succinctly put it together. So it's a lot of information for one slide. Again, this is being recorded, but thinking about the virtual approaches towards learning that will afford your learners and your students and your children both synchronous and asynchronous modalities to learn from. Where when you think of synchronous, it is that direct instruction approach. There's that in-person, face-to-face. When we're talking about asynchronous activities, we're thinking about, okay, what other types of activities can be done when you're not even when you think about, let me back up a second, even with synchronous, it's not just about being in person, it's even virtual. So like right now, what we're doing is virtual, so it's synchronous. But if I gave you a task from here to take and go do something, like if any of you were on the ECAN call earlier this morning, I put a couple of things out there that for ECAN to think about. So them taking that time to do that work would be asynchronous. So kind of putting it in perspective. So it's that, but what we're trying to figure out is, as all of this counts towards potentially instructional hours, how do we do that? And I will say now, I don't have an answer. We don't have an answer, not just in Michigan, but there's not even a recommendation from the Office of Special Ed Programs nationally. What I will fully say and encourage each of you to do is, as we have indicated back from, March, document everything. What I would like and what I encourage you is to figure out a documentation that works for your ISD, your local, your classroom, your program, that highlights and captures the synchronous learning that's happening, the in-person, the virtual, the hybrid aspects, and then the asynchronous, the activities that still would look at educational hours, but you can't capture that because you're not in person or you're not virtual. But think about how that can be captured in your district, because what if we can count these hours? And that's a can, it's not a may, it's not an if or a when, but if we can, I would rather you have the documentation from the get-go than to have this in January and say, well, if I would have known, or if you would have told me this was on the plate. So really wanting to give that document, and if you haven't started documenting the other activities outside of being virtual, phone calls, emails, other types of activities that you're giving to families and children, please start documenting that, because I'm really hoping at one point we can start utilizing that for instructional hours. So fingers crossed, but I will keep you updated, but start documenting if you haven't. The last thing I think this is the last thing that I have before I turn it over to Kirsty, is I want to give you an update on the inclusion builders. We had the preschool development grant, Birth to 5 funded preschool inclusion initiative. And this was to support up to 7 ISDs for an inclusion and equity support person, specialist. Those applications were due October 6th. We had received 11 applicants, and up to 7 of these 11 will be funded. And that notification date to those 7 ISDs, those 11 who submitted, will be November 3rd. And I think on that, we turn to Strong Beginnings. And I turn it to Kirsty. I'm going to sign off. Everyone have a great day. And if you have any questions, put them in the chat or feel free to ask Mark. Bye.
Bye, Lisa. Thank you. And so just really a reminder about our deadline for the Strong Beginnings 3-year-old preschool project. Applications are still coming in. We have a deadline coming up of October 20th. We're really thrilled with the amount of interest that we've been receiving on this initiative. And like the inclusion applications, the notification date will be November 3rd. And so October 20th is a firm deadline. Looking forward to getting all those in and keeping the process going. Thank you.
Okay, Early On is up next, and here we are, your Early On team. So we talked about this in our last call a bit, but we have a wee bit more information for you. The Early On GEAR funds, the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Funds, as we noted before, and we've sent information through the listservs, there's an allocation through the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund for $1 million for Early On that we are dispersing using the Early On formula. And if you haven't seen it on the MDE Early On webpage already, we do have the allocations posted there. The allowable use of funds for the GEAR funds are for personal protective equipment, and that would be for PPE for anybody within the early on program. That could include families or staff. Additionally, this includes funding for program and assessment materials to leave with families. So that could be screening type materials, that could even be hands-on type materials or activities to support families between visits. Finally, technology and connectivity items for families. So that could include hotspots, Google Chromebooks, things like that. The funds will be distributed on a reimbursement basis using the cash management system. The application is live in MEGS now. So as you all know, initiating this work, it needs to be a level 5 user initiating this application. These applications are due, you can go to the next slide, sorry, I went ahead myself. Applications are due on November 15th. So we have a pretty quick turnaround on this because we really want to ensure that the funds get to you. The great news with the GEAR funds is this is a reimbursement allocation. You can go back all the way to March 13th of 2020, which is when schools were and programs were originally closed, to request reimbursement of those allowable activities. And that expenditure period can go through September 30th of 2021. So there's going to be, maybe if you're going back to March 13th, you're going to have some interesting book work to do to ensure that your payments align with your fiscal year. So you may need to work a little more closely with your fiscal folks at the ISD on that. We work to make the applications fairly easy and streamlined for you so that you don't have major burden in applying for these funds and we don't have major burden in approving these funds. So you'll need to either accept or refuse the funds, complete a needs assessment and a budget, all of which are activities that you're probably pretty used to. If you have additional questions, feel free to contact any of us, Laura, Colleen, or Noelle, or we have a mailbox for our early on programs and services that you can specifically send questions there. That helps us keep everything in one place, and it helps keep us answering any questions in a kind of unified and consistent manner. So mde-early-on@michigan.gov. Is there anything, Laura or Colleen, that you want to add regarding GEAR funds that I may not have thought of? Okay.
Anything?
Okay, so Colleen is going to talk to you a bit about the 54D funds.
Hey, good morning. Now that we have a state budget, we know that the fiscal year 21 allocation for state school aid section 54D is the same amount as last year, which is 7.15 million. And that means that your local allocations will be very close to what you had last year because it is with the formula, and the formula is updated each year with new birth counts. It may fluctuate a little bit from last year, but should be fairly close. Those allocations are posted on our website, the MDE website. They're posted on the EOTTA website, and I believe they were also emailed out to all of you. And the application for this, we were not able to begin building the application in MEGS Plus until after the state budget was passed. And because that was the case for all of the applications in MEGS Plus that have state funding, there is kind of a backlog, and so it's taking some time to get that built. So we want to let you know that the application will be very similar to last year. It will include the focus area spreadsheet. It will include the data spreadsheet and a budget. And the focus area spreadsheet and data spreadsheet will both be uploads again, just like the past couple of years. And We are planning, because we know it will take a little while for that MIGS application to go live, we are going to put together all the materials, the spreadsheets and the instruction sheets and the important information and all of those pieces, put them together in a packet and email them out to all of you so that you have all of those materials and can begin the work on preparing for the application so that when it does go live, you should be able to just do your uploads, enter your budget, and be able to submit quickly. We don't know exactly what the deadline for that application will be until we know that it's built and ready to go live. We can't set that deadline, but we do know that we typically would set that at approximately a month after that go live date. So you'll have, once it does go live, you'll have about a month, but with having the materials ahead, we'll hopefully be able to do that very quickly. So that's what we have about the federal fiscal year 21. Then we wanted to talk a little bit about the fiscal year 20, wrapping up what you had for fiscal year 20. This is another MEGS Plus budget that is our application that is being built. It's ever so close to being ready to go live, but it's not quite there. And so it will be a final expenditure report and carryover budget combination application that you will access by going into your fiscal year 20 budget regular application, and you'll look for a spot that says examine related items, and then there'll be links from there that will be for this new final expenditure report and carryover budget. That's how you'll get to it. In there, you will report in the final expenditure report all of the expenditures that you have had up to September 30 of 2020. Any funds that remain at that, well, first, if you expend everything by September 30, 2020, you only need to do the final expenditure report and submit that, and you will be done. If when you complete that report through September 30, 2020, there are funds that remain for after September 30, 2020, carryover funds, you will then need to complete the carryover budget piece, which will be right below that final expenditure report. And so you will need to create a new budget, a carryover budget that reflects all those remaining funds, and then submit. Once, if you have do have carryover that you're putting together a carryover budget for, when you complete your expenditures, you will also find, by going back to that carryover budget page, there'll be another examine related items spot with a link to a carryover final expenditure report. And that's where you will do your reporting of those carryover funds, how they actually were expended. And once you've completed that carryover final expenditure report, that will tell us you're done spending the fiscal year 20. And once you've submitted that, you will then begin getting your fiscal year 21 funds within your SAMS payments, your state aid payments. So any questions related to either the fiscal year 21 or 20 final 54D funds?
I just have a quick question, Colleen. I want to make sure I understand correctly. So did you say fiscal year 20 needs to be fully expended before any of the 21 funds will be distributed?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes. And so as soon as you've submitted either the final expenditure report showing that all of the funds are expended, or the carryover final expenditure report, if you have carryover, but that will trigger your being able to start your payments for fiscal year 21.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for the clarifying question, Ton. Appreciate it. Okay, so we have a few other updates for you for early on. The first of which you would have received notification last Friday of some restructuring at the Michigan Department of Education with between our early on program and Part B 619, Lisa Wozak's program. So the notification went to early on listservs, early childhood special education, and GSRP. We have some exciting movement happening within the Office of Great Start, where Part B, Section 619 will be moving over to the Office of Early Childhood Development and Family Education, and we'll be blending early on in Part B, Section 619 into one new unit, which will be within our office in Early Childhood Development and Family Education. The new unit will be Birth to 5 Early Childhood Special Education. This work has been a few months, several months in the works, where we've been really trying to be more streamlined and bring our programs and services together, kind of cut down those silos and really think about the best ways to serve the early on and Part B Section 619 populations and their families in a more streamlined way. We believe that through this development of a new unit, where we'll be able to serve the field much better through our alignment and creating some efficiencies in there. We're really focused on the improvement of transitions and early childhood outcomes across our programs and services. So this will give us much more of a chance to work in tandem, coordinate, collaborate, and really maximize the resources that we have between our programs. This is an exciting shift, but it's going to take some time. So the first step, one question Mark asked this morning was, what is the timeline with this? And we don't have an exact timeline because there's so many things that are contingent on each step. And the step we're working on right now is hiring the Birth to 5 Early Childhood Special Education Manager, which is actually a replacement for my position. So you know, I moved from being the early intervention, early on manager to being the department director in March, and I've been kind of wearing the two hats by continuing that role. So this new person will have a revised role in supervising the Birth to 5 Early Childhood Special Education Unit. Once we have that person in place, then we start working on transitions. One other exciting thing with this is that this has all been occurring with frequent conversations and some very focused planning with the Office of Special Education. So with that, while we're working to create better efficiencies and align our work within Birth to 5, we're also working to do that within special education K-12. So one way, I think Terry and I both put it in the ISD directors meeting yesterday, was now you get to deal with 2 directors instead of 3. So that streamlines some things right away. And that gives us a chance to do a lot more working together. As time goes on, it's already started, as you can see with these combined calls. But as time goes on, we'll be kind of working towards strategically bringing together our programs and services to really maximize support to you all and support for our infants, toddlers, and preschoolers and their families. So we're really excited about that. We'll keep you updated as things keep kind of moving along the path. To do it right, it's not going to happen tomorrow. And to do it right, we also need to really come together and collaborate around a shared vision. So we're really excited about this. Then we have one more thing, the MSDS service early on services component. We've been talking about this for a while with the 54 DEEP funds. We were going to make this a mandatory part of our collection for the fall, and we've had so many really good questions and wonderings, and really want to make sure that what we collect here is aligned and coordinated across all ISDs, and that we can compare apples to apples with our data. So This early on services component piece will be optional for you now, not required until your end of year general collection. So we're developing guidance for you on this right now, really being reflective of your questions and your ideas. So the guidance will be coming your way soon. So we thank you for your patience on that, and hoping that moving this, the mandatory component of this to the end of the year is helpful. And now we can move on to the next slide.
So Noelle, there was one comment in the chat. So this means Lisa Wozak is moving over to working with the other ECSE staff. Question mark, exclamation point.
Yes,
That makes total sense.
that does make total sense. We should have done it earlier. Yes, that's exactly what's going to be happening. So we will have one unit that will be inclusive of Lisa Wozak, Laura Goldthwaite, Colleen O'Connor, Barb Schinderly, Cheryl Najum, within the Office of Early Childhood Development and Family Education.
Thank you for that update.
Thank you.
Now we're going to move into some breakout conversation.
And so as we move into breakout, I know Nancy has some logistics to help us out. We'll be dividing into small groups, and there'll be random assignments. And what we'll be doing is allowing you all to have conversation with one another. We'll provide one of our TA point people to take notes on your discussion if you like. And if you want to say, don't write that down, we won't. And not that we're doing anything really with it, except just taking notes for the conversation. And then we'll have an opportunity to come back together. And one person who will be the reporter from each group, who is not the note taker, will share out any highlights or any ahas, any anything you want to share. And so for the next period of our time together, we'll have an opportunity to discuss. The questions are, what mode or modes of intervention or instruction is your district using? What is something that is going well? Describe an ongoing challenge. And what guidance do you still need? And so this helps us do some planning. It helps you consult with one another and just gives an opportunity for some FaceTime with one another. And so I see a couple things in chat and just acknowledgement. Nancy, are we ready?
This is harder than it looks.
And I think in the meantime, we're going to pause recording. So I'm going to hit the pause button right now.
And then open up the floor for anyone that would like to share, or whoever your designated spokesperson was, to share the highlights of what was talked about in your breakout rooms.
Nancy, are you calling on us from breakout room 1, 2, 3, 4? Would that help?
I can.
Okay.
How about we start with breakout room 1?
And while breakout room 1 is getting ready to share, would you like to have the screen up there, or shall I put that down so everybody can see everybody?
Nice to see everyone.
Yeah, I think so too.
As much as we love your thoughtful, well-designed PowerPoints, it would be nice to see everyone.
You know, that's what I was grasping for.
I know.
All right, moving on. Elaine is the spokesperson for room 1.
Okay, Elaine.
Great. So we had a variety of people that did just birth to 3, some that just preschool, and some that did both. So one of the things that came out was that some of the districts are using a letter to parents that informs them of if they are doing in-person, like in-home services, what the requirements are for that. And it's not something that they're having the parents sign per se, to get one more piece of information that parents have to sign, but they're just notifying parents of of what the requirements are going to be, and then making changes in that plan based on what the parents want to do or what they actually do when they're in the home. So if you go to the home and they're not actually wearing the face mask and following procedures, then they would switch to doing virtual based on that to protect staff. Some of the issues is just that there's a lot of variety going on with what from district to district, who's doing what plans, and that a lack of universal guidance as far as like virtual learning experiences and what it should look like at this point is causing there to be a wide disparity in the services that are being offered when it gets down to the details. What did I miss?
Great.
Sounds like you covered everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, how about breakout room 2?
That was Sarah Larkin. I think we were breakout room 2. Yeah, I think so.
Sure.
Sarah?
Welcome to. Hi. All right. So in our group, it sounds like there's quite a variety of instruction and parent coaching taking place, both virtual, remote, face-to-face, and as well as home visits. One of our group members talked about having clean rooms or well-ventilated areas where they can meet. So it sounds like that we're moving more towards the face-to-face interactions versus virtual, but offering those choices to families depending on their comfort level. And I think we all kind of felt like a huge sigh of relief once we did come back to that face-to-face. There was all the anxiety that was building up, a lot of fears. But when we actually got back in the classroom with students for ECSC, it was like, okay, this isn't so scary. And if anything, the kids probably brought that sense of normalcy. Other things that are going well, it's really boosted our use and access to technology. Also parent participation. If children are participating in virtual learning, it's forcing the parent to also participate. So we're getting a lot of that communication and engagement with parents. Also, it just shows the adaptability of our team members and executing their craftsmanship. And also really just increased collaboration with our teams so that we're working together to provide supplies and different lessons to our students so that we're all on the same page. Some challenges that we're still having, it is hard still to complete that full comprehensive evaluation, especially in that virtual setting, and to see what a child or a student might look like with peers because it is so isolating when they're at home and not with other children. And it does kind of feel rushed too, like let's just get the minimum that we need in this evaluation to find a student either eligible or not eligible. And we're maybe not digging as deep to get all the information that we typically would in a pre-COVID scenario. And then also we still have our families who are not logging in, not connecting, not engaging. So really trying to problem solve and troubleshoot how we can connect with those families.
Hey, thank you for that update. And thank you for all of your sharing today as well. How about breakout room 3? And I do realize we are at 12:30, so some people may need to drop off, but again, we are recording people's responses, so it will be available for you to listen to if you do need to hop off. I apologize for that. I wanted to make sure you had time for the questions, but also a little time to share out. So breakout room 3.
Yeah, I think that was us.
Okay.
We had a nice conversation about masks and parents and staff who feel that may not be necessary to wear them now that the Supreme Court had ruled the executive order not effective. So, but we all talked about, Cheryl Granza had some nice guidance that she put out shared on the Mace Google site that, in order to be employed, you have to follow our plan. I really like that comment, Cheryl. It's a, you know, you're working for the district, and this is the preparedness plan, and that our board approved, and MDHS also put out some guidance on wearing masks, so we're remaining to follow those orders. So we had some discussion about that. And of course, offering parents the option, you know, if you can't wear the mask, we can offer remote services, we can shorten the visits, so you can wear the mask for a shorter time, or you can suspend services, you know, so there's options, leaving it up to the parent. We also talked a little bit about how we're going to spend our gear funds, and some highlights of that, the Chromecast stick to connect to your TV. So if parents only have a phone to view your remote services, they can connect to their television and see a bigger screen, a bigger picture, and see better. So that was a nice idea. And some PPE bags that sounded like people were putting together for staff that included a fogger. So when you felt like you had to sanitize your car, you could spray the fogging spray, and all the things that they would need for PPE, including a laminated sheet with the QR code for the health screen, and things that they have to remember to do. So that was it.
Thank you for that. How about group 4?
Well, Ken was going to be our spokesperson, but he left.
Okay.
I don't know if others, Jen, if you want to help me out.
I don't know. I'm not really much different than what other people said, except we did have a lot of discussion about evaluations and some of the barriers that we've had to doing those, and also the strengths that people have shown in home visiting with their coaching and innovation, and real excitement for DocuSign and Adobe that have made our providers' lives much easier with signatures. So I think that was kind of the long and the short.
Okay, thank you. And how about group 5? Maybe that spokesperson also had to leave.
So group 5, this is Chris Hickey, had very, very similar. It seems like we were all together, not in separate groups, because the conversations were very similar. But some of the additional highlights from the group that I had the privilege of listening to was just to talk about the flexibility that they have found in staff, that they, you know, we're just acknowledging how flexible they were with changes and things happening, and the creativity that was coming from all of their folks when there was a difficulty or a problem. Some of the highlighted materials that were being utilized, someone mentioned the therapy dolls and how that has encouraged folks to be modeling pieces for families, and how positive that was. And there was a question that didn't get answered and was in the discussion. And I don't know if Karen is still on the call, but it might be worth, Karen, for you to just acknowledge that question to the whole group. We might get a clarification on an answer for that.
Okay. So the question is, right now, our numbers are down in our GSRP classroom because of the COVID. And so in the one room in particular, there are only 8 students enrolled. 4 of them already have IEPs. Granted, 3 of the 4 are just speech only. The other one a bit more involved. But the teacher is thinking that 5th child in the room might need a referral. Now, if that child was found eligible, the question is, would be for coding purposes, does that room then, because then over half the class would have an IEP, does that class need to be coded as a self-contained early childhood special education classroom?
That is a very interesting question. I do not have an answer. I will open it up to the participants on the call.
Is Lisa on the call? Or did Chip step away?
Her name is here. Lisa, are you still there?
I am. Trying to unmute myself.
Okay. Did you hear the question, Lisa?
I did not.
Okay.
So in the name of time, maybe I can respond to that.
Please.
The guidance that we've been given so far with reporting all components for the special ed, or all characteristics of the special ed component, is to go back to your IEP, not to the current situation. Remember, even that child that may be found eligible after this count is only taken on the fall count. So that is in the future and you don't have to worry about that. And your up to 50% is still allowable as a gen ed setting in which children with IEPs are set. So that child would be coded as being in an inclusive setting at this point. So I do know that it brings up some questions about early childhood special education, because many of those kids come in with codes that don't even apply to them because they transitioned before you could get to the appropriate code. Again, in those situations, given the OS guidance, we would suggest that you use what is on the IEP, what was the offer of FAPE, not what is happening because of COVID. Hopefully that makes sense to you.
Okay.
If I could, one thing that came up in our group that I didn't hear anybody else mention, but I think it's important to note, is that even though it is allowable for ECSE staff to count time spent coaching parents and talking to them about how to deliver services and intervene with their kids at home, that many ECSE staff haven't been trained per se in parent coaching, and there's a disparity between like birth to 3 where that's their focus, and 3 to 5 where it's usually more of a classroom setting, and that it's not that staff aren't willing to provide that support to parents, it's just that they could probably use some more training and coaching themselves to do that effectively.
That is a very good point, and it is one that we are aware of, and we are looking at how can we broaden to be able to provide some of that in some way, shape, or form. Just the very beginnings of those conversations. So we'll more to come in that area. So I believe that's all. In case Christy wants to say something else today, I think I think we only had 5 groups today. Thank you everyone for joining our call today and participating in the breakout groups and staying on a little longer to share your highlights. Any questions that came up, we will take to the department for conversation as well. And everyone have a great month. And as soon as we have the November date set, we will be letting you know so you can register. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, bye.